Hello everyone, my name is Mario Tiozzo and I'm the Data Analysis and Visualization Librarian here at UNB Libraries. Today we're going to take a look at how to analyze the Statistics Canada data in this spreadsheet to create various data visualizations. Our first data visualization is the line chart. A line chart is typically used to show changes over time or to create a link between similar data points. For this, let's pick the deaths from influenza data as it is a time series. First, we highlight the data series that we want to use. Go here. Great. We then click on the Insert tab, and we can click on the Line and Area Chart icon drop-down menu in the Insert ribbon. We will pick the first option, Simple Lines. And there's a skeleton of our line chart. Let's move it up here. We quickly notice that it's not quite right. Excel thinks that both these series should be lines in the chart, but you want the year data series to be your independent variable. Let's fix this. First, let's delete the year data series. Just click on it and press the delete button. This part is a little tricky, but I will walk you through it step by step. Let's right-click anywhere on the chart and select the Select Data. This is basically the inner workings of that chart. You can see influenza on the left where our dependent variable is located. You can add, edit, or remove series in this panel. We're happy with this section of the chart, so we're going to leave that part alone. On the right-hand side, we see the section for the independent variable. You can see that it's marked 1, 2, 3, etc. And that's also showing up on the x-axis of our chart. This is the default setting because Excel doesn't know what to use for this series. So let's show it what it needs. Let's click on the Edit button, enter the year range in the box. Press OK. You can see now that the data is now in a right-hand box and has also been incorporated in the chart. Quick aside, the Select Data option may look different if you're using a Mac or Excel Online, but all these elements should be there. For example, here's a screenshot of a Mac version, and you can see that the series and associated dependent variables are there. The independent variable on the x-axis is here, so that's where you would want to put your year data series. Also note that I could have also modified my year data series to be in a date format, and Excel would have known that the data series belongs in the x-axis. Let's try to recreate this quickly to show you how it's done. So here I would put 1/1/2002, for example, 1/1/2003. I could just drag this down to 2022. Right-click, Format Data Cells, Custom. And instead of this year format, we just want the year in this example. So you can see that this is a date format. If I take my influenza data now, copy it over here, and I use this data set, and I recreate the chart again, Excel automatically knows that this is a date and therefore puts it on the x-axis. Either way works. It's just a matter of what you prefer to do. All right, for now, I'm going to just delete this and delete this. Okay, now that we've solved that issue, we need to do some work to clean up our visualization a little bit and make it more meaningful. First, let's modify our axes in order to make it easier for our viewer to consume the data. Let's right-click on the y-axis and select Format Axis. This brings up the right pane where you can modify the bounds. There's a lot of dead space before 3000, so let's make our minimum 3000 and our units 1000. This is the jumps that the axis numbers will take. Let's put this at 3000 and 1000. Great. Let's also modify the x-axis by right-clicking anywhere on it, pressing Format Axis. Let's make the units jump by 2 years so that the data is not as squished together, and it also puts the text in a horizontal format, which makes it easier to read. So we go to Labels, and instead of 1 here, let's put 2. Great. Let's also alter the chart title. We could choose a generic title like Number of Deaths from Influenza from 2002 to 2022, but let's try to have a more insightful title, something like this. This provides more information to the reader and highlights a point you are trying to make with your data visualization. All right, let's bold this, make the text a little bit smaller by reducing the font size. We're almost there. Let's finish up by cleaning this up a little bit and removing any elements that may distract our audience. Let's remove the grid lines as they add extra clutter to the chart. So click on any grid line. It'll select all the grid lines, and you can just press the delete button. Let's remove the legend. This was put in because we originally had 2 data series with our date data. Since we only have 1 line now, this becomes redundant. And let's also remove the chart border. So we have border here. Instead of automatic, let's put no lines. And now our chart doesn't have any borders. Great. That's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a line chart. Although let's go back to the y-axis and just work on the numbers for 1 second. Let's go to numbers. Instead of general, let's go to number, 0 decimal points, and use the thousands separator. Great. That makes it a little bit easier to read. Now we're done. Our second data visualization is the scatter plot. The scatter plot is a great way to display relationships between 2 variables. This can be interesting at the individual level, but it tends to be used to view how the entire dataset behaves and to note if there are any relationships therein. First, we select all our data. In this case, let's use both the influenza and the CLRD death data. Highlight that. We then click on the Insert tab, and we can click on the scatter plot chart icon in the Insert ribbon. We get a bunch of options, but we will pick the first option, the markers only option. Now let's try to clean this up a little bit and make it more meaningful. First, let's add elements that we want to include. Let's start by adding a trend line to this chart to see how the dataset behaves. If you left-click on the chart, you'll notice a plus sign next to it. When you click on it, you'll be able to add and delete chart elements. Some versions of Excel, including those running on a Mac, won't see this plus sign. No problem. You can access the same commands by left-clicking on a chart again. This brings up the Chart Design tab at the very top of the page. Let's click on that. Now click on the very first button on the ribbon, the Add Chart Element. From there, you'll be able to add all the elements you require, axis titles, trend lines, etc. Let's pick trend line, and let's pick the linear option. It's important to note that a trend line is not the same as a line chart we saw earlier. A trend line is a line of best fit, which means it is a line that minimizes the space between it and all the data points in the series. In other words, not all the data points are on the trend line, whereas a line chart connects all the data points together. So we can see from this trend line that it is upward sloping, which provides evidence that there is a positive association between the 2 death variables. Now that we have some direction on our message, let's work on our chart title. Again, we could use a generic title like Deaths from Influenza and Chronic Lower Respiratory Diseases from 2002 to 2022. But let's try to use a title that provides more information to the reader and highlights a point we are trying to make with this data visualization. Something like this. Text is quite large though, so let's lower it a little bit and let's bold it. Let's also add axis titles this time. We didn't do it when we constructed the line chart because the elements were fairly intuitive in that instance, and axis titles would have caused more clutter for little informational value. In this case, however, axis titles will help clarify this data viz. To do so, left-click on the chart, press on the plus sign, and click on axis titles. They appear here. Let's change this one. Because we have the acronym in our title, CLRD, we can now use CLRD here, and it won't seem as cluttered. Influenza deaths. Great. Note that in this scenario, there are no units. But if you had units for your numbers, such as kilograms or kilometers, you would include those in your axis titles. Again, our data is squished at the top, so let's modify our axes in order to better view our data. Start with the y-axis, right-click on it, Format Axis, and let's make the minimum bound 9,000, and our leaps by 1,000. And while we're at it, let's go to numbers. Instead of general, let's go to number, no decimals, but we want that separator for a little bit more clarity. Great. Let's do the same thing for the x-axis. In this case, we'll start at 4,000 to 9,000, and we have 1,000 jump in our units, which is great. And we'll also change the numbers here. Number, 0 decimals, great. Okay, now that we've added our elements, let's clean this up a little bit and remove any superfluous elements. Again, let's remove the grid lines, both the horizontal and the vertical. So click anywhere on them and press delete. Click anywhere on those and press delete. Great. And let's remove the chart border. Go no line around the chart. Great, that's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a scatter plot. Let's move on to the last data visualization, the bar chart. Most people usually say the bar chart whether the bars are vertical or horizontal. But technically, when the bars are vertical, it's called a column chart. But I, like most people, say bar chart for both these instances. A column chart or a bar chart typically helps us visualize summary statistics like counts, means, and the like. For this example, let's use the influenza immunization by provinces dataset. So we can highlight the dataset. We'll just include the provinces and not the national total. Let's then click on the Insert tab, and we can click on the bar/column chart icon drop-down menu in the Insert ribbon. We'll pick the first option, 2D column. You'll notice that the province tags on the x-axis are diagonal because some of them are so long. This makes it difficult to read. There are many ways to fix this, including shortening the words, such as using provincial abbreviations. This can work depending on your audience, but certain audiences, such as people not as familiar with Canada, may not understand this shorthand. To solve this, let's instead use the bar chart, which is handy when dealing with longer text. So let's delete this one. Let's highlight our data again, go back to the Insert tab, let's go to our icon here, and instead of going to the column chart, let's click on the 2D bar chart. Again, it needs some work, so let's clean it up a little bit. First, let's modify a few elements to make this visualization more meaningful. We notice that the bars are not sorted in any distinguishable way. Let's sort them to provide more insight to our readers. Let's go back to our data set here. In the Home tab, let's go to Sort and Filter, Custom Sort. Here in a drop-down menu, we can sort by either column E or F. Let's sort by F, which is the number of influenza immunizations. And we'll go smallest to largest, which isn't intuitive, but I'll explain in a second. Press OK. And now our data has been sorted. You'll notice that the data has been sorted in the chart largest to smallest, whereas our actual data is sorted from smallest to largest. This is a quirk of the bar chart, which I don't understand, but it's just something we need to work with. So now our data has been sorted, which makes it a lot more intuitive. We can see how each province compares one to the other. Now let's make our bars more prominent by reducing the space between this. We can do this by right-clicking on the bars, pressing the Format Data Series, and here in the bar chart icon section, we have gap width, and let's change this to 50%. Great. Now let's add elements that we want to include in our data viz. Left-click on the chart, press the plus sign, and let's press on Data Labels. Great. Let's press on the arrow of the data labels, and we have more options here. And in the bar chart icon, we have numbers. Again, instead of general, let's go number, take off the decimals, but let's include the 1,000 separators. Great. Let's also alter the chart title. In this instance, I will choose a generic title, something like this. If I wanted to point something out, for example, I may choose to make this title more informative. I could also use color to make a point. To do this, I would right-click on the bar. Notice that the entire bar series is highlighted. I will go Format Data Series. I will go to the Fill bucket. I would go to the Fill bucket again. I could pick a color here. I could go to More Colors. If I knew my RGB code, I could insert it here, or my hex code, I could insert it here. But for now, I'm just going to go with a standard color, make everything gray. Now, if I want to pick an individual bar, I would click on the entire data series again, but then click again on the bar I wanted. Repeat the same process, fill bucket. Let's make this one blue. Only British Columbia turns blue. So here I could point out that British Columbia has a lower population than Quebec, but has a higher immunization total, for example. This could also be reflected not only in the color choice, but also in the title as well. Notice that the x-axis on the bar chart starts at 0. And remember how we modified the minimum bound of the previous visualizations? Bar charts and column charts are different in that they always need to start at 0 because doing otherwise misrepresents the data. So if you ever encounter a bar or column chart that does not start at 0, make sure that you fix that error as it is incorrect otherwise. I'm going to press Ctrl Z here to get us back to our normal chart. We're almost done here. Let's finish up by cleaning this up a bit and removing any elements that may distract our audience. You know the drill by now. Let's get rid of the grid lines. Click on them, press delete. Let's get rid of our chart border. Right click, format chart area, border, no line. Close this. This is a bit more controversial, but I take a more minimalist approach to my data visualizations. I like to delete most elements that are redundant, and since the data is now embedded in the data labels, I will discard with the x-axis elements. Click on that, press delete. That's looking pretty good. This is a good example of a bar chart. Okay, that should be good for now. We've learned different ways to visualize our data, from line charts to show changes over time, to scatter plots, which show relationships between two variables, to column charts, to visualize summary statistics. I hope that this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.